Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, Big 12 Media Days behind us, which means the countdown to fall camp is truly on. We're getting to what's next for the Red Raiders up ahead. Also, an exciting new way to make applesauce. Next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Great to see you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. Always appreciate being your first listen on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. He's the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. And Chris, great to be back with you once again, my man. We've got Big 12 Media Days in the rear view. Plenty to get to on that subject from a tech and league perspective. We'll also get to what's coming up next between now and fall camp for the Red Raiders. But obviously, when we have that conference media days in the rear view, Chris, we are truly on the downhill slope as we're getting closer and closer to fall camp, closer and closer to football season. And certainly something that has been a theme of this offseason, and I know stuck out to you as far as what we heard from Red Raiders, particularly their head coach, Joey McGuire, there in Arlington last week. Expectations remain very, very high. And I know there's a long list of challenges for the coaching staff and for team leaders as they enter the season. But maybe at the top of that list, Chris, is just plain and simply managing those expectations and making sure between the years your guys are right, man, because the spotlight is not getting any dimmer as we get closer to kickoff.
Yeah, it was there was a couple of themes from a Texas Tech standpoint. And, I think from, obviously last weekend, I think that the managing expectations thing is something that, they're not alone in this. There's some expectations, obviously, for a variety of schools. I mean, Texas is having to deal with it as the favorite, even though I think they're getting asked, like, do you feel like you deserve to be the favorite? I mean, so there's, it's your last year in the league. I think Kansas State's, managing expectations like, hey, man, okay, can you do it again? And I think, on and on it goes down the line. But I think it was funny because Joey let you inside his head a bit when he started talking about, and I thought this was pretty fascinating. He started to kind of say, this is what, there are expectations with your team, coach, and you've kind of embraced it as you talked about, Cowan. But Joey says something to the effect of, in one of the interviews that he did, it's like, this is what keeps me up at night. This is what I feel like my main job is right now. It's not, picking whoever's going to start at whatever position. It's not, what play are we going to call against this formation, whatever football-wise. It's how do I get these guys to, because I think he admitted there's a lot of guys that have never, been on a championship type, journey like he thinks they may have a chance to go on. And so this is going to be foreign to some of these guys. How do they handle it? How do we manage it? What buttons do I, try to push each day to keep them, and I think he talked about, he goes, I've always had a countdown clock, in like the weight room and stuff. And, Michigan's famous for having that countdown clock, and it's however many hours and minutes and days you have left before you play Ohio State. But he's like, our countdown clock counts down to the first day of fall camp. He goes, doesn't have Wyoming on it. It doesn't have, some other opponent on there, or the opener, or the home opener, or whatever. It's the first day of fall camp, because I want them to stay in the moment and all those things. But it's pretty interesting because I think he was very transparent there, talking about, hey, this is what kind of I worry about my team, is making sure that we handle this and that we embrace it and that we're okay with it and that we hit it head on. And maybe he's worried for nothing. Yeah, enjoy it.
How about enjoy it at one point or another too? I mean,
yeah.
I think that staying in the moment deal is key, because I was watching the Netflix quarterback series, and I'm watching Patrick Mahomes go through his Super Bowl season, and I'm thinking during those some of those moments where he's on the bench, it's a defensive possession, whatever. Like, that's the part where it's supposed to be the most fun. It's almost like, all right, how do we prepare to get there? And then what's it going to feel like when it's over? And you sort of forget, maybe, especially when you're young, I suppose, that while you're in it, that's the part that you should really be enjoying. When the lights come on, whenever the work is paying off and you're getting to do what you have worked on being really good at doing. And that is being the best teammate, being the best team overall. I mean, I just think there are moments where you want to make sure that while you have a bigger picture goal, you're still really embracing just the enjoyment of that day-to-day thing you are engaged in, because you're engaged in it for a reason. Number one, you like it, you would like to think, or you possibly love it. But number two, you're really good at it. So I think keeping them in the moment is certainly high on the task list for any head coach. But for Joey McGuire, who's trying to transition the mindset of his program, maybe even more so, Chris. And I thought another quote that stood out to me was him talking about, we're just looking at that light at the end of the tunnel as they bear down on what could be a really exciting season. And of course, I think we're all hoping that it's not an oncoming train that's providing the light there at the end of that tunnel, because you never know what the reality is going to be. But there's no question to me, Chris, that as you've gotten into this mode here of thinking, all right, we expect to be contending, that there's no doubt that's the theme of the offseason. I'm asking myself, okay, what's one of, or maybe the most important attribute a team like that can have in order to be able to handle that as a team? And I just immediately go to experience, seasoning, age. I go to veterans, and I think I want a locker room with some mature guys in that scenario to be able to handle it. And I wanted to ask you, because I think I know the answer and I'm kind of excited about it, at least for myself, but does Texas Tech have that? And what things pop up to you as far as, okay, what do you need to be able to handle this kind of thing as far as your team or locker room, I guess, makeup is concerned?
And back to the quarterback series on Netflix, I was startled at the establishment in Kansas City, the pumpkin patch type thing around Halloween when they when Pat and they're shooting these apples out of this machine gun.
That was amazing.
I was like, where is this place? Like, you could just go make instant applesauce. How I mean, that had to be so. Yeah, he's like, and popping apples out of that deal. Yeah, that was fascinating.
Come on, corn maze and Lubbock. Yeah. Where's your apple Gatling gun?
Yeah. Yes. You talked about the other thing about Joey and I think that the contingent, because some of the takeaways that the writers had that write about the conference as a whole, regionally, nationally, whatever, there was a lot of, hey, man, I think Texas Tech may be this year's TCU. Hey, I think Texas Tech may, pun intended here, but upset the apple cart. I think Texas Tech may be the one to watch. And I'm a bit uncomfortable with that. And I realize we have had these own conversations about, you can't have it both ways. You either, want the hype and embrace it, or you're scared of it because you're, whatever. I wish there was a little less chatter about it, but I realize I can't get, I can't get my way on that, because I mean, it's the train is on the tracks now. But I think they've embraced. They're not backing down from the expectation, and I think Joey included. And Joey's, like I said, he's like giving it a big hug, and he's told you, as we just discussed, he's told you a few of the concerns he's got. Not that they may be massive concerns, and he may tell you, I really ultimately have no reason to worry, but this is what coaches do. You're always trying to figure out what the right buttons are to push. But I think that the group that he takes there to Dallas is. And I think Tyler Shuck kind of led it, and I think Hutchins and Bradford too. I think people really see a mature old team, and that's hand in hand with why you're being talked about in some of these conversations about winning the league, playing for a league title, whatever it may be, because of how much age is on your team. I mean, 16 super seniors, I think, last time we looked at that and counted it. There's a lot of age here, and I think that Tyler Shuck, I think, really impressed people when he got around him last week, just with his. And then you find out that he's going to get married next spring, and Joey's going to, if there was any concern about Tyler Shuck and some of that, the commentary that he had after that Oklahoma game last year, when it was like, I believed in myself all along. Some of these people down this hallway didn't. If there was any concern that was like a real thing, and that wasn't just, Tyler like being a competitor and like being fairly transparent about everything, that everybody wasn't on the same page. The guy doesn't ask his head coach to officiate his wedding. I mean, that ought to tell you everything you want to know about player-coach relationships on this team. And I thought that was a little look behind the curtain as well. I thought pretty cool stuff.
That was super overblown from a season ago. I think the man was just painting a me against the world picture, and he got on a roll. You just got on a roll. You didn't believe me. They didn't believe me. My mama didn't believe me. The hallway didn't. He's just on a roll. All right. And by the way, I think, the reality that some did question what his future would be after that injury and then the emergence of Baron Morton was justified. There was at least one guy on this show that questioned what the future was going to be, and that was me. So I get it. I think that was totally overblown. And yes, I did not know that Joey McGuire was set to be, I think, a third time now Reverend.
How about that?
I think three. I mean, he knocked out two, and Shuck's going to be the third. And
what can he not do, man?
What can he not? Climbing cranes, bringing folks together, and holy matrimony. I mean, what can this guy not? Beating Texas and OU, let's not forget that, in the same season for the first time in program history. Now just go maybe hit a double-digit win level, and I don't know, bring home some hardware. Let's see if we can put that on the list next.
Yeah, and Colin, the other main thing, and this wasn't just like and this goes along the lines of why I think Tech feels the way they do, and I think Joey specifically.
First, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and the official sportsbook of Locked On. And there's never been a better time to get in and get busy than right now, because you could be getting 10 times your first bet amount back in bonus bets up to $200. Win or lose. You heard that right. You bet $20, you're landing $200 back in bonus bets, win or lose. So head on over to FanDuel.com/lockedon or download the FanDuel app. Safe, secure, and easy to use, and get started today. And if you're a winner, you're getting paid instantly every time with FanDuel. Just one reason why it's the best place to bet, and one reason why it's America's #1 sports book. So head on over right now to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/locked on, and get started today with FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball.
And Colin, the other main thing, and this wasn't just like and this goes along the lines of why I think Tech feels the way they do, and I think Joey specifically, but it was another theme for the week with especially the new programs, or that this was a conversation that was talked about by everybody. But I think Joey, this is really why he feels so good about his team. But the conversation or the topic was depth. And I think he really likes the depth on the defensive line, now in the secondary. And we'll see about, if A.J. McCarty is eligible or not to play immediately. But it was just depth on his football team, depth at wide receiver, obviously depth at quarterback. You've got a little more depth now at offensive line. On and on it goes. And he's talking about, well, we got 6 different guys that could start at outside linebacker. And like there's no drop off. Well, when you talk about the new programs, it's like listening to Dana and Gus Malzahn and some of these new coaches. It was all about, they all in unison kind of talked about, well, we looked up about a year and a half ago and we realized we've got to attack the depth standpoint, especially up front on both sides of the ball. That's where we're not necessarily Big 12 ready, and they've kind of tried to do everything they could to get to that point for right now as they're about to debut in the league this fall. But that's why I think Joey feels so good about And he's trying to tell everybody how good Steve Linton is, Cowan, and all that. And some people I think are probably going, okay. And other people are like, man, do I need to buy this? Do I believe, how good this kid may be and he can ably replace Tyree Wilson? But some of that defensive line depth, I know he spent a lot of time talking about, but that was kind of a theme from the week I thought was kind of fascinating. And it's a valid point, man. We've talked about it. You got to have depth to get through the week in and week out, and it's a grind.
Yeah, no question. And before we leave the media day conversation, let's get to the guy that was, probably in the second nicest suit in the building behind Joey McGuire, who had quite the jacket. That being Brett Yormark. Chris, I know the future of the Big 12 Conference is obviously one that's very intriguing, and in part because of the impact that it will have on other leagues and vice versa. Yormark fairly mum, I think, on the future of the league as far as expansion is concerned. He talked about, having a plan, and they hope to execute it very soon. There was talk of whether or not there was, a magic number to be at or not. But some of what he did in just touting goals achieved, I guess you would say, he had the big list there at the beginning of his presentation, saying just simply last year off the field. And if you didn't see this graphic, the title said last year I said the Big 12 is open for business. Since then, and he goes on to name, I don't know, 10, 12, 15 different items as it relates to things that have been attached to the Big 12 Conference. I was a little more, I guess, taken with some of that as opposed to maybe more realignment-oriented conversation. But it was definitely a different feel as far as the way that your commissioner was not only presenting himself individually, but presenting the conference. I think that was obvious for anybody to pick up on that's taken in a Big 12 media day or two in years prior. It was a different vibe, right?
Yeah, I think his task has been to monetize various aspects of the league. And I think, it was kind of interesting because he talked about, everybody's asking him about expansion and the media rights deal with the unnamed conference, which is the Pac-12 and all that. And he admitted, he's like, I don't, and he doesn't know for sure, but he's like, I don't think I get my same, deal that we got the league right now that we did when we took it. And we were just fortunate that everybody was on board and that we were able to negotiate early and then jump on it because that it has changed. The landscape has changed and it's constantly changing. I think that as far as the realignment part, he gives you the spiel about we've got a plan, we're hoping to execute it sooner than later, on and on. We have a feel for what we think he means. It sounds like San Diego State is not a factor in there. Doing nothing may be a factor or an option. Certainly waiting on the Pac-12, specifically Colorado and Arizona, and then I think UConn, and I'm not sure where Gonzaga is, but he does indicate, and I thought this was interesting because I don't know. I guess this is true. I don't know. You give me your opinion, but he said, since we've talked about expansion, I realized that our Big 12 fans, have a passion for growth, and they want to grow this league. And so, I guess that's true. I don't think anybody just wants to grow it just to grow it. But I think that, yeah, if you're talking about some of the possibilities there with the Pac-12 institutions, I think, yeah, there is a passion for growth. I don't know if I'm wanting to grow so much as to feel like I need to include UConn or Gonzaga or a bunch of these basketball schools. I don't know. But that's what he said, and I thought that was a little look and him being a bit transparent is that, there's some passion for growth here. So that's what we're looking to do.
All right, we're stepping away from Big 12 Media Days. Next, we'll get back to the 806 and what is next as the countdown to fall camp is truly on for Joey McGuire and the Red Raiders. Next on Locked On Texas Tech. Glad to have you along for the ride on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your first listen every day on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Subscribe on YouTube if you haven't so far so you never miss an episode. What is next on the Red Raider radar? Well, it's fall camp for the most part. We are truly in countdown mode as we get closer to that. But Chris, just wondering what's next, anything and everything for Joey McGuire and his staff or the team, the players between now and fall camp. Is it, whether it's recruiting priorities or something, totally not to do with 2023, or is there any chance for a breath to be taken? Are there weddings to officiate, cranes to climb? I don't know. But what's some of what's on the schedule here for these guys in their final few days and weeks?
Yeah, so the staff has been off for a couple of weeks as recruiting kind of hit the dead period at the beginning of July-ish. I don't know exactly what date, but that's kind of really the one sweet spot of the calendar year to where they can get away, get with their families, and Joey kicks them out of the office. There's about 2 to 2.5 week sweet spot there, and that is basically just wrapped up. And so most of the staff, if you're listening to us on a Monday, most of the staff is at or in attendance at the Texas High School Coaches Association convention and coaching school and all those things. I think Coach McGuire spoke at various things. I know Coach Hamby was speaking. I think there's a variety of different tech staff members that had different topics that they were going to touch on, some on the field, some in classroom settings, all that stuff. And I think that's, example of Joey being what he is, man, and not forgetting his roots. And I think that's gone a long way into how well you've recruited and all those things. But the team doesn't report until I think you report August 3rd, and I think first practice is August the 4th, I think is right. So, there's a few more weeks of quote unquote off season.
Yeah.
And I think that's weight room, that's finishing up, the second session of summer school and things like that. But I don't anticipate this to be like a quiet couple of weeks, but it is a couple of weeks out before that countdown clock in the old locker room strikes zero and then camp officially, begins. And so, that's what media days always does to you, is like you get excited about everything and then you realize, damn, there's like 7 more weeks before we play a game. There's about, 3 more weeks before practice officially starts. But again, it's one of those things you got to check off the list before you can get from one to the other.
Yeah, and one of the things media days did to me this time around was make me wonder whether or not Tyler Shuck could play defensive tackle for you. Did you notice the picture of the representatives there with Coach McGuire outside the stadium and Tyler Shuck towering over everyone? And I mean, not just towering, but thick set looking dude heading into 2020. I was blown away, Chris, by the size of Tyler. And I've met the dude in person, stood on even ground with him. I mean, I know he is not a small man, but when I saw that photo of him, it kind of reminded me of Tyree Wilson last year. I hate to make that comparison because there's nobody that really reminds you of Tyree Wilson, but the differential, and you got 2 DTs that are standing there in that photo. You got Jerron Bradley, not a small individual, but I was just one note before we wrap this sucker up, and I was blown away by the profile of Tyler Shuck, the dude. You and I have talked about it. Some of the signs that he's been adding this offseason look to be for real. And man, it really got me wondering, got the gears turning, wondering about the ways in which he could be used this season. And I just keep thinking about how physical he was in Ames, Iowa. And with some added bulk, you think that's going to lessen? I doubt it, but time will tell, I guess.
His size is as much of a reason as any other as why NFL folks look at him and go, I think you can play in this league because he is, you see 6'5", 235 or 6'4", I don't know specifically, the height there, I don't know if he's closer to 6'3" or if he's closer to 6'5", but he is, he's not Donovan Smith tall, but he's really close and he's really thick, but he has, everyone will tell you, he added some weight and kept his speed, if not improved it. And I think that's where he really surprised a lot of folks last year that just they thought they had him figured out on what he was, and then they see something different and like, didn't know this about him. And, because he's this kind of big white dude, and you don't think athletic big white dude. You just think, okay, I've seen a lot of big white dudes that play quarterback that can't move well. Well, he's not one of those. And, his injuries in Austin and then last year versus Murray State are both with him getting down the field or diving into the end zone because he is athletic and all those things. And I thought it was interesting because he was asked a lot about this. Like, hey, man, what are you going to try to do to stay healthy? And he's like, I got to be smarter and this and that. But he's like, everybody's kind of like labeled me. I'd never missed a game prior to these other two injuries because of injury.
Yeah.
He's like, Tony Romo broke his collarbone like 6 times. And he had to hit all these quarterbacks that have had similar issues. And, he's like, it just happens, I had some bad luck, but I think it's fun that you notice how it's a large human, man, and he's a signal caller, and he's not going to shy away from contact. I think you need to be a little bit smarter, yes, but that's just kind of who he is.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see what the 2023 version of Tyler Shuck looks like. Hopefully it looks like a healthy version. Thought everybody did a great job. Not that you would expect anything different, but always love to hear Tony Bradford or from Tony Bradford and the others that were in tow there. But I thought they did a great job representing Texas Tech. And as I mentioned, Joey McGuire, #1 jacket in the building. You would have to imagine with the little pirate tribute there on the inside.
He just doesn't miss a thing, man. It was a subtle, tip of the cap to somebody that meant so much to the program that he now coaches in. And I think it's a way to tip his cap to Mike and almost tip his cap to the fans that loved Mike so much and for what he did for football and high school football in general. It was just, because nobody saw that coming. Nobody thinks that he's going to show up to Big 12 Media Days and have some tribute in the lining of his sports coat, but it was perfect, man. It was perfect. And along the lines of Tony and Jalen, last thing I'll say before we get out of here, for my part of it, I'm going to miss those guys, man. They have become staples and spokesperson. They are the epitome of student athlete and perfect examples of what it's supposed to look like whenever a kid goes to college. They have squeezed as much out of Texas Tech as they possibly could. Multiple degrees, and everything, and gotten to play football and all that along the line. But Texas Tech has soaked up as much from those two individuals as they possibly could have either. And I just think it's a fascinating duo that we'll remember around here for a long, long time. And I hope their best football is still ahead of them, and I think it might be.
And happy 36th birthdays coming up for both of those guys, or whatever the number is. Yeah, man. I mean, they're just part of the family at this point in time. Yes. They've been here so long, and maybe the best still yet to come. You hope from a team perspective, some achievements are there for them this season that will reward some of the stick-to-itiveness that they have shown, to use an industry term. All right, we're out of here, back on the other side with plenty more to get to. We'll talk about some of the defensive back concentration we've seen from Texas Tech on the recruiting trail recently. We've got TBT action coming your way in the LBK here this week. Some Red Raider legends in the 806 that we'll see on the floor from United Supermarkets Arena. And why does Kirby Hocutt think Chris Del Conte is still scared? We'll get to that and much, much more coming up this week on Locked On Texas Tech. Chris, looking forward to doing it with you once again tomorrow, man. See you then.
Absolutely. Keep hope alive, everybody. Glad to be back. We're going to embrace the grind, and we're not going anywhere for a good long while.
Subscribe on YouTube so you never miss an episode. And thanks again for making us your first listen on YouTube or wherever you got this podcast. For Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. We'll see you for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.